Welcome back to the Sherry Ricard Show, a podcast where faith and business intersect to inspire you and empower you as women. Each week, I'm sharing powerful messages of faith, offering practical business advice, and discussing strategies for achieving success. I'm featuring insightful conversations with industry leaders and faith-driven women, providing you with tools and inspiration to grow your business while staying true to your spiritual values. Now let's get ready, ladies. Let's rise, pray, and conquer, and let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of the Sherry Ricard Show. Thank you for joining me. Can I just take this time to say, get out there and vote today. Today is voting day. You may be thinking, what's my little vote going to do? It's going to do a lot. Get out and vote. We cannot afford another 4 years like we've just had. So please get out and vote for change. It doesn't take you long, and everyone is expecting you to vote. Remember, God is our source, but He gives us resources in order to achieve our dreams, our goals, and our desires. My guest today is Dr. Wendolyn Slattery. She is a retired infectious disease physician and author. She turned her battle with terminal cancer into a testimony of faith and resilience. After a 25-year career saving lives, she found healing in writing and leaving a spiritual legacy for her family. Well, hello, Dr. Slattery. How are you?
Good. Thank you. And thank you, Sherry, for having me on your podcast.
Oh, of course, because I was just telling you before we started recording that I'm super excited to dive into your testimony, your story, because you are a retired infectious disease physician, but you're also an author and you have an incredible testimony of healing and faith. And so I want to kind of dive in because I think I know a lot of my listeners are women of all ages, but I've noticed in more of the analytics that we do, a lot of these women are in the age range of 34 to actually 65, which is a huge range. But I also have data for girls as young as 16 that listen. And I know for a fact my mom does, and she's almost 83.
Good. You got a great audience.
So we are just a women of all generations and ages.
Good.
So I know that you'll be able to speak to all of us in some way. And I think that sometimes when we have our testimony and a story to share, especially of that of faith, we don't even realize who we're affecting at a certain level. And it's something that they could grab back later in life and go, I remember this Dr. Slattery talking about that. And it's amazing we can affect people's lives through God and without even meaning to, we just do. So that being said, I want you to kind of dive into your story of not just a story of healing and what you've been through. With cancer, but just kind of start from the beginning. You were a physician and just how did you become a physician? Because I know that back years ago when you were in school, that's just, we were not supposed to do that, Dr. Slattery. We were supposed to be sweeping floors and raising babies. So
right, exactly. Well, I think the best place for me to start is with a story.
Sure.
It was January of 2018, and I was entering into my 14th year of the most incredible dream come true job. I was the infectious disease doctor at one of the busiest hospitals in Minneapolis. And it was January 9th, 2018, and I decided I'd go see my doctor for a primary, annual checkup, which I did. And we had a good time talking. I'll see you next year. She drew some labs. But the very next day, she called me and she said, Wendy, I want you to go back to the lab and I want to draw a few more tests, which I did. But it took me by surprise that she would want to do this. And what was she thinking? And I couldn't, my health had been fabulous. Was energetic. Everything was great. So I did it. But by Friday, January 12th, I had not yet heard from her. And I thought, oh, shoot, I don't want to go into the weekend not knowing what she was thinking about. So what I did as a physician, I got into the electric chart myself, and I went straight to my most recent labs, which is what she had ordered. I could not believe my eyes. I was peering upon the unmistakable labs of a fatal blood cancer. And I knew enough about this disease in medical school to know that what I was seeing gave me about 3 years left to live. And it was absolutely incongruent with how I felt. I felt great. But there it was. The truth was right before my eyes. So it was at the end of the day. I got into my car and I drove home in silence. I turned off the radio. And all I could think about was those three fabulous little grandkids I had 6, 10, 6, 8, and 10. I would never get to know them, and they would never get to know me. I decided that I had to write my story for my grandchildren, hence the book, The Edge of the Unseen World, A Doctor's Journey from the Imaginary to the Impossible.
Mm.
But I wrote it not like a diary, but I wrote it like an engaging movie that they might be watching. There were some profound messages that I wanted to impart to them, and they would best be told within a story.
Mm.
So, in that book, there are three story arcs, and they're all threaded together towards a miraculous ending. And the three threads are number one, experiencing the transforming voice of God. And the first time I heard that voice of God was I was 12.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you that story a little bit later. The second thread that I wanted them to understand is to learn how to live on the edge of the unseen world so as not to miss those serendipitous things that God does in our life for our benefit. Now, I was never able to articulate that until I was 64 years old. And the third thread throughout this book, as you would want any good movie to have, right, is a roller coaster. And inside the thread between all three story arcs is this roller coaster of ups and downs and in some cases lost dreams, perhaps crashing despair, and then searching for that something that rescues. And what is that something that rescues? Just going into the first story arc, I'll say it's the 1950s, and this is what you were asking about earlier. The 1950s and the 60s. So you're kind of getting a hint of my age here, right? I live on a farm, one of 7 in the family. I'm isolated. This is a time of no cell phones, no internet, no access to the outside world.
Yeah.
We have no money whatsoever. And it's a hard scrabbled childhood, to say the least. There's disadvantages because of money. And there's prejudices because when you don't have money, there's some prejudices. But the other thing is, you're a girl. I'm a little girl on the farm. I want more than anything to be a doctor to my animal friends. I have 40 sheep, and I pretended I was their doctor. It would be years before I understood that when you want something really badly, perhaps that is the desire planted in you by Psalm 37, verse 4. But I'll talk a little bit more about that a little later. But I wanted to be a doctor, but I couldn't be a doctor. You can't be a doctor, Wendy. You can't. But this first story arc is kind of a brief insight into yesteryear. What was it like? And I wanted my grandkids to know, what was the world like before cell phones and stuff? And I wanted them to know about my first encounter with God.
Mm.
The story of that voice, I was 12 years old, and I had an older sister, and she was autistic. And these were the days where different was not celebrated.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, they were ridiculed. And as an autistic child, she withstood so much teasing, and it was awful. I watched it because it was a small school. We got on the bus, we rode the bus. It's a small school, and it was really brutal on the bus. And I prayed often, God, heal her, please heal her. She's my sister. And every time they hit her with the teasing, it hit me. I felt it. And one day, it was particularly bad. I got off the school bus and I went straight up to my room and I was crying and I was looking out my window. What I didn't know is that I had thrown the gauntlet down to my creator. I was so angry at him. I was so angry. If you are who you say you are, then why can't you heal her? Why can't you take away all that teasing, the meanness of a lot of the boys, the
Right.
teasing that never ended. But
Mm.
they didn't tease me, but they all struck my heart because she was my sister. So there I am. I'm looking out the window and I'm just saying, I don't know what needs to be healed. Is it her mind? Is her personality? Is it her behavior? I don't know. But if you could heal her, all of this would stop.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I can only tell you, you're 12 years old and you know what you know, right? You feel, you see that veil between us, between me and my creator, got very thin. And all of a sudden, I could hear him crying too.
Mm.
I was aware that not only was I hurting for Gail, but he was hurting too. And then I heard, not audibly, but I heard his voice come through another dimension. And he said, Wendy, I made her absolutely perfect, and she will help you become the person I want you to be.
Mm.
I never forgot that. And I wanted my grandkids to know it.
Right.
Because when you're 12 years old, you think that you have to be an adult to hear God. But no, you don't. You could be 12. You can be 12 years old and hear the voice of God. In the greatest despair, you can hear the voice if you're praying.
Right.
So, anyway, he visited me that day, and I never asked him again for that because I knew she was perfect. And I knew that someday she would, I would see her humility and I would want to emulate it, just like her. She became my hero. So that was the first story arc. But I'll have to say that I lost my way. Nonetheless, in spite of hearing the voice of God and understanding who he was, I still lost my way. It became the 1970s. It's the women's liberation movement. And man, it's all about me.
Yeah.
Me, 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 me,
Like
me.
it is today.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
I
Me,
guess
me, me. Mhm.
it started way back then. But anyway, that of course you can't do well with a world like that.
Mm.
Eventually you do crash. If the world's all about you, you will crash until you start to reach out and find out that there are others that are needing just like you, that are
Right.
important. But now I'm seeing my sister Gail touch me with humility, and I could see what she was helping me do. And I came back. But I will say, we're going to now step into the second time that I heard the voice of God. So I'm 38 years old and I'm happily married. I've got a little girl. I had just dropped her off at the bus stop and I got back into the house with Sam, my my poodle, and we got into the house. I made it myself a cup of coffee, clutched my cup of coffee as I went into the living room to do my morning prayers. And I sat down and I started to pray. And all of a sudden, the veil got very, very thin during my prayer time. And I could hear the voice of God. And he handed me this metaphorical, or is it allegorical? English wasn't my good
Mhm.
subject,
Me neither.
folder. And he handed me this folder. And I knew exactly what was in that folder. He handed me this folder. Inside of it was the memory, tucked away, filed away in the back of my memory, that someday I want to be a doctor. And he handed me this folder and he said, Wendy, the time is now. What? What? I'm 38? God, I'm 38. I have never taken a science course. I didn't, when I went to college, I majored in extracurricular activities. I
Yeah.
got I got not a that decent of a GPA, and for heaven's sakes, I didn't even take a science class. God, I can't do this. And um, I'm 38, but something inside of me knew when I that veil was so thin that Wendy, nothing's too hard for me. You're going to make it, and I believed it. So
Mm.
anyway, it took me 3 years to get the science classes required to apply for medical school. And somehow somebody overlooked that GPA because I got in. I
Wow.
got it. I got into medical school, but by the grace of God, because he said I was going to get in. And that brings me to Psalm 37, verse 4. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. And I didn't understand this, but it's not what I want. No, he planted it in me when I was a little girl that someday, Wendy, you're going to be a doctor. And it would be many years later that that desire manifested itself in going through all of that. By the time I got accepted into medical school, and by the way, there were 1,650 applicants for 50 spots.
Wow.
There you go. I got in, but by the grace of God. So I'm 42 years old. I do my 4 years. And by the way, science was so magnificent that I was mesmerized by all of it, by my creator showing me the science that he used to put this world together. I can't talk enough about that. That'd take 3 more podcasts, I think. But
Yeah.
it was so magnificent. And I wanted my reader to understand creation and science go together. They are not separate worlds. Our creator created a beautiful world, and he was showing it to me in science in the medical school, and I absolutely loved it. The journey was fabulous. And so then I did my residency in internal medicine and then went off to the University of Wisconsin for infectious disease fellowship. And so 42 years old when I started, 51 when I finished.
Wow.
And
It's
but I
awesome.
will what I would like to say that the journey to become a doctor became was like a theodicy, a God-driven, adventurous journey to reach the place one looks for all one's life, that place of great satisfaction. And it was a place for which the desire God placed in one's heart, my heart, is seen by spiritual eyes long before it arrives. It
Mm.
was awesome. But just like the roller coaster I told you that threaded through the entire book, so the roller coaster came crashing down with the cancer.
Mm.
Only 13, I finished 13 years in into my 14th when it all came tumbling down. I guess that that is the nature of a story, right?
Right.
Everybody's lifetime. But so the struggle to survive then became the predominant world for me at that point in time because my cancer, I found out that my bone marrow was saturated with cancer. I underwent chemo, followed by the stem cell transplant. And then 3 days after the transplant, I went into septic shock. And people, yeah, as an infectious disease physician, I can only say that very few people survive sepsis when
Abs
it's found in the outside before they get to the hospital.
Right.
And that's where it was. My husband went down a one way to get me to the emergency room at the university. Of course, people are honking him, he's literally going down the wrong way off a one way, and he's racing to the emergency room. I'm in the stable room for about 2.5 hours as they pumped about 30 pounds of fluids in me to keep my heart pumping. But oh, Sherry, another miracle. I survived it, only to tell you now that God is amazing.
Wow.
He got me through it. But I know I've heard your story of what you've gone through and the losing of your child. I can't even imagine. That's much worse than I've got what I've gone through. But I'll tell you that it was there's like you say. I think I've heard you say before the intensity of getting past
Right.
why me, God, why me, to then finally getting to a spot where you can place your trust in God. For me, it was facing a terminal cancer. Um, and I did relapse 3 years after all of this. I did relapse, but miraculously it disappeared. And that's what I think I learned. And I guess I have to learn it every time I reach a crisis. But whatever God asks his people to face because they fear him, it's actually better than simply remaining alive.
Yeah.
And that's the point I had to get to when I could really that's when I could really trust him, that it was okay for me to die if that's what I had to do to serve him and
Mm.
fulfill my goal for his plan for me.
Wow.
Anyway,
And look at
here I
you.
am 7 years into my survival, and I'll be fine.
And
You know.
you're just, I mean, you look awesome.
Well,
You
thank
know,
you.
it's almost like you're telling the story of someone that's not actually you, you know?
Thank you.
And then you wonder because I completely I've been through so much in my life
Hmm.
that you know, you do. I had this conversation this morning with my sister because I'm going through another roller coaster
Oh.
in my life, but I've learned enough to know
Hmm.
that God will give you the strength.
Yeah.
But sometimes, like I told my sister, I said, I don't want to be strong anymore. I want somebody else to take over. I just want to move on and just I don't want
Yeah.
to talk about it anymore. I just want to be me and live in peace. And then God says, but I can trust you to be obedient, to
Right.
continue to talk to people about how to overcome one adversity over another. And I was like, I don't want to be that adversity teacher. I don't want to do that anymore, God. And then he laughs at our plans because he makes us strong in the situation that we are. And we're
Right.
always facing, and some of us face more than others. You know, when you
Right.
said, I haven't been through what you've been through, sure you have, because God will only give you to
Yeah.
the ability that you can handle and to me and as well as someone else. And so the pain that
Hmm.
I've been through is just as equal to somebody else's pain of turmoil. You know, we
Yeah.
all have this different level of things in our life. And, you know, when
Mhm.
somebody says, oh, I'm going through a divorce, I'm like, girl, you're going to get through that. Don't you worry about it. You're going to get, because it's something I've been through. And then
Yeah.
if somebody says, well, my child passed away, my heart just like
Hmm.
crumbles in a ball and I have to take a deep breath because it's almost like I feel that initial pain
Hmm.
from them. And then what sets in is, okay, now I have to go into healing mode.
Hmm.
I need to talk to them about healing or whatever it is. And I'm like, God, is that what you want? You want to experience every destitute in life so I can talk about it? Can I just raise my hand and say, pick another classmate? Because I
Yeah.
don't want this anymore. But, you know, my sister and I were talking about that today, and she said, you are a pillar of strength. And I said, I don't want to be. But then again, we can't be just what we want to be. We have to be what God purposed for our life. We have to be what He made us for. So,
Hmm.
you know, I'm sitting here talking to you, and you're saying 7 years later, and I'm like, you're the only woman I've ever met that started medical school at 38. You're the
42.
woman that
42.
32. You're the only
42.
42. You're the only woman that I've ever met that graduated at 51. I've never met anyone like that.
Yeah. Well, when I was done with my whole training program, yeah, it was 51.
But I mean, how many women or even men do you meet that carry that on in their 40s? You know, I
Yeah.
mean, maybe
Yeah.
if you're in that career and you meet them, but you know, I didn't start nursing school till my babies were 3 and 1. So when I hear some of these young girls go, oh my gosh, I had to study all night and I'm just so tired. I want to go take a seat, girl,
Yeah.
because
Right.
I was juggling two babies, going to two different daycares because the one daycare couldn't take both of them. So I had to juggle a
Oh.
3 and a 1 year old and two different bags and two different babies and get them to two different daycares to go to nursing school all day, to come home to take care of two babies and study all night. So the ones that are complaining without babies need to take a seat
Right.
because if I can do it, you can do it. And we
Hmm.
could talk about a whole nother podcast about how the enemy comes against you because I was 4 months before graduation and the devil came right in and tried to take my entire
Mm.
nursing graduation away because I was praying with a cancer patient. And
Oh.
the person that was over the school
Oh.
wasn't actually, she was an atheist. Yes, it was a Methodist school of
Hmm.
nursing.
Hmm.
But she was an atheist. And I was praying with a patient at the patient's request. She caught me and threw me out of school 4 months before graduation.
Oh.
So that's a whole book in itself. But let me tell you
Right.
something, but God. I always say,
Hmm.
but God, because it was by the grace of God
Hmm.
that the Rutherford Institute heard my story, which is an
Huh.
attorney firm that actually protects Christians all over the country, heard my story, took my case for free. I was back in school in 2 weeks and never had any ramifications from it because she was forewarned. Not only did I graduate, but I went on after that. And literally, when I tell you, my husband says, "Why does this never happen around me? It always happens around you." I said, "Because God didn't gift you with the ability of doing CPR and bringing people." I have done the Heimlich and Ruth Chris Steakhouse. I have done chest percussions and shocking in a patient at a gym. I have pulled over at a car accident and pulled a baby out of a car. I mean,
Mm.
God has put me in situations that I did not want to be in. But then you have to look back and you go, "Oh, that's right. It's your plan for me, not my plan for me."
Amen. Amen. Which takes me to Jeremiah 29:11.
I love
Oh
that.
my goodness. And I have hung on to this so many times. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. Then you will call upon me and pray to me, and I
Mm.
will listen to you. You will
Amen.
seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord.
Wow.
Don't you love it?
I love it because
Yes.
I am such a control freak that I want to control things, and then I have to picture God laughing and going, "Okay, Sherry, how's that working out for you? Are you ready to move over and let me get in the driver's seat?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to drive for a minute." I mean, that is just how things are, but
Yep.
your story and your testimony is incredible. And
Oh, thank
I
you.
I just continue. I'm going to pray for you that God continues to use you, especially those women that are suffering in any aspect of disease in their life that
Yeah.
feel like this is where their life is supposed to end, because you know you are a true testament to anything can happen. I mean, you
Mm.
could have something happen next week and you go, "Oh, this is just part of the roller coaster because I'm going to head up
Mhm.
the next week." And it's hard for us to do that
Sometimes.
sometimes. Sometimes I just want to hide away in a little ball, put me in another country and change my name. But we can't do that, right?
No.
We have to stay strong in the face of adversity, and it's definitely not easy, and your testimony is incredible. Now tell us a little bit about the book. So you wrote the book originally for your granddaughters and so
Yeah, three grandchildren,
3 grandchildren.
two girls and a boy.
Oh,
And I wanted them to, like I said, to have that message, the edge of the unseen world, a doctor's journey from the imaginary to the impossible, because I wanted them to know who God was in my life and that He can be in their life, um, through poverty to achieving their goals. And of course, if any, their own roller coasters, we all get them,
right.
um, and I tell you, they were my first three readers. They all wanted their own books individually,
Oh.
signed by the author. They're very my favorite grandchild,
Mhm.
and they devoured the books. They loved the book, and that's my greatest compliment was that three children read the book because it sounded like a movie to them, and that was kind of cool.
It is kind of a movie, actually. So I'm thinking a really good Netflix movie,
That's what
actually.
I've heard people say. They've read the reviews have been like amazing on Amazon. I'm just really thankful for the
Oh
readers who
yeah,
left
I
messages.
can't wait to get that because I love true testimonies of how God has used some of those turmoils, adversities, hurdles, challenges, heartbreaks, and
Yeah,
pain that we all have in different facets.
yeah,
I've heard
yeah.
stories, when my book came out, Wake Up Call: A Mother's Grief Journey, originally had come out back in
Mhm.
2014. I wrote for 7 years, and that book came out. And I did a little speaking tour in 3 different states. I was in Mississippi, Louisiana, and Arkansas, and I met women that have lost 2 children within
Oh,
a year. I met a woman that just I think about her often
mm,
because her 17-year-old son had a friend over spending the night, and his friend shot him in her home, and he had to go on trial for murder. I mean, just the craziest. You're like, "What? How do you do that?" Because now you're dealing with, it's one thing to be angry, right? In grief, we all go through the different
mhm,
phases, and we all grieve different things. You can grieve your health when you have,
right.
a disease. There's divorce. You grieve. Everything's
Mhm.
a grief. But I thought now she's got to go through that grief of anger at a
Oh,
person
yeah.
and go through all the court proceedings, and then you think about people whose children are kidnapped and murdered, and there's just there's tragedy all around us. And
Right,
if we don't
right.
put our faith in God, I had someone ask me one time, they said, Sherry, I know you do coaching and you help people with grief and adversity, but how do you do it with someone that doesn't believe in God? And I said, well,
Mhm,
here's the thing. I can't help you because I can only teach you
mm,
my
mhm,
faith and how God
right.
will use your faith and your belief in Him to guide
Mhm,
you through this grieving process.
mhm,
If you don't believe there's God, I can show you where there is, but I have to
mhm.
refer you to a coach that can talk to you about that because that is not what God gifted me with. And
Right.
and you'll be amazed who you can actually win over to the Lord by being just that authentic and honest and say, this is the only way I know.
And no one can dispute your story. Your
No.
testimony is yours and it's authentic.
Yeah.
And there's nothing greater than an authentic testimony
Right.
to win somebody over.
Right. It's a movie too. I think we both have pretty
I think so.
Yeah, and so many of us are, if you think about it, I think that's why people are intrigued by reality shows and Netflix documentaries and things like that,
Mhm,
because we learn a lot visibly. Like our visual learning aspect has changed
mhm,
so much from way back to what it is now. I'm
mhm.
actually a visual learner. And I think that's how I got through nursing school because I was not this AB student, but I could look at a picture of a cell and in my
Mhm.
mind, I could create in my mind by looking at the picture on what went in, what went out, and what happened within that cell. But if you'd have read that to me,
Right.
I would have given you a deer in a headlight look. Like, I don't even know what it said. But reading it and actually seeing the picture or watching a movie of it, of some
Mhm,
sort of an animation, helped me get through nursing school. Um, God got me through nursing school, obviously,
mhm,
but that is what actually helped me get through nursing school. So because we're all this visual learning, that's our
mhm.
aspect. I think that's why we can learn from true documentaries that are very
Right,
educational versus reality
right.
TV that
Yeah.
is mean and probably half scripted. Uh, you know, but I think it's true. I think you can teach someone. I think that's because
Mhm.
the movie The Chosen was so popular
Yes.
because instead of reading the Bible, which a lot of people won't take the time, not just
Right.
to not read the Bible, but not read at all, they can watch the movie Chosen and truly connect with the
Mhm.
character of who Jesus actually
Right.
was.
I
And
love that series. Oh my goodness.
I've watched it 3 or 4 times. I'm like,
Yep,
we need more of that
we
because
do.
my husband and I turned it on the other night and I said, "Really, honey, I've seen it 4 times. I could actually be an actress in it at this point."
Right, exactly.
But there's some good ones coming out. I know
Yeah.
there's some good movies with Angel Studios coming out. So tell us about the book. Where can we get the book so
Yes.
we can read
Well,
more?
let me send you to my website. It's
Yes.
Wendy, Wendy Slattery, one word, Wendy Slattery at Wendy Slattery, I'm sorry, wendyslattery.com.
Excellent.
And there you can I've got two places. You can go Barnes and Noble, and there's a tab to go to Amazon or Barnes and Noble. It's also on audio. So some audio listeners don't like to read paper, but they like to listen. So you can get it on audible.com as well. And
Nice.
on the website, wendyslattery.com, there is a documentary, and it's done by an Emmy Award winning film author or filmmaker. It's short, about 12 minutes, and that gives you a little bit of the background of the book. I'm also on Facebook and LinkedIn, and you can email me at wendy@wendyslattery.com.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Yes,
I
thank you.
really, really appreciate you
Mhm.
coming on, and I'm so glad that we connected.
Yes, thank
We
you.
are
Me
we're
too.
on totally different ends of the country. I am way South Florida, and I'm originally from Louisiana. I moved here a year ago, and I'm missing Louisiana. I love my palm trees, but I'm missing my Louisiana folks. And you spent time in North Dakota, which is where my brother's grandchildren are in North Dakota.
Ah,
So way up there. So yeah, I've been to North Dakota once, I believe. Yep, I went once. And it was enough to know that it's way too
You didn't
cold.
want to live there. It's cold. The wind blows all the time. There's nothing to stop it.
No, I've been to Minneapolis a few times, a couple of times with work, and it's still cold. It's still
It
cold there
is.
too.
It's cold today too.
Yeah, I did travel nursing, so I've been to Michigan, I've been to all of those places enough to
Uh,
know that I would rather have my toes in the sand than in the snow.
well, you're in the right place right now, aren't you?
I am in the right place. That's for
Yes.
sure. Well, thank you so much.
Oh,
and
yeah.
guys, anyone that's listening, go out and make sure that you follow Wendy Slattery. Go to her Facebook, grab her book. I'm excited to read it and her testimony. And thank you again. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Sherry. I appreciate you and being on your podcast.